He didn't need a woman, just a strong hand to help him survive. She wasn't looking for love, just a way to run free. But the instant he claimed her at that auction, the West would never be the same. Their fates were tied, for better or worse, and the wild was about to find out just how dangerous they could be. Cal had always been a quiet man, his life carved into the land like the ridges of Ashlock Ridge itself. A rancher, a loner, and a survivor. He didn't need anyone. Didn't want anyone. Not really. The land with its unforgiving expanse was all the company he ever needed. He'd been born to this life, to the creaking of leather straps, the whistling winds, and the relentless pull of the plow through the dry earth. But the land had its secrets. It was wild, untamed, and full of things that could kill you in the blink of an eye. Things Cal knew all too well. And tonight, it had something else, a girl. He hadn't expected to find her, not here, not like this. It was too late for anything good to be happening out in the desert hills. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the last of the firelight from his camp flickered in the breeze, struggling to stay alive. The night had settled into its usual quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wind through the scrub and the distant cry of coyotes. But there, standing in the shadows, her figure half draped in the dying glow of the campfire, Cal saw her. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a coyote or some other wild thing wandering the desert for a meal. But when the firelight caught her, the shape transformed into something human, or at least something close enough. She was tall. Taller than most men, but not quite a woman either. Her hair was wild, untamed, blowing in the wind like a dark halo around her head. It caught the fading light and flared like a wildfire against the darkening sky. Her skin was browned by the sun, marked with scars, bruises, and a weariness that spoke of something far older than her years. But it wasn't just her size, her wildness that caught him, it was the way she moved. The girl didn't walk like most people. She moved with a grace, an untamed energy that reminded him more of a creature of the desert than a human being. Something wild, dangerous. Cal's hand rested on the rifle at his side, but he didn't raise it. He didn't want to scare her off. Instead, he took a slow step forward, watching her carefully. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough from the dry air. For a moment, she didn't answer. Her eyes were the first thing that caught him, bright, too bright, like they had seen things no one should have to see. Something flickered there, a pain so deep it made his chest tighten. And then she spoke, her voice low, gravelly, like it had been worn down by years of shouting into the wind. "Rel." She didn't offer more. She didn't need to. The way she said it, though it was more than just a name. It was a challenge, a warning. He could feel it in his bones. This girl wasn't like anyone he'd met before. She wasn't someone you could break. No, she was the one who would break you. And Cal wasn't sure if that terrified him or fascinated him. He didn't know why, but something in him told him she wasn't a danger. Not to him, at least. He knew the land better than most, and he could read the signs, the shifts in the wind, the movements of creatures around him. He'd spent enough years living alone, watching, listening. The girl didn't feel like a threat. She felt like a storm on the horizon, one that was coming, and there was no avoiding it. "You lost?" he asked, his voice quieter now, though his hand still hovered near the rifle. She didn't answer right away. Instead, her eyes flicked around the camp as if sizing him up. Then, slowly, she took a step forward and another, until she was within arm's reach of him. "I'm not lost," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "But you are." He raised an eyebrow. "I'm not lost. I know exactly where I'm at." She gave a quick, humorless laugh. That's what they all say. He didn't know what she meant by it, but it didn't matter. He could sense something in her, something raw, something untamed. He didn't know where she'd come from, but it was clear enough that she wasn't like anyone else he'd met. For a moment, they just stood there. The fire between them flickered, casting long shadows across the desert floor. Then, she spoke again, and this time her voice was softer, almost weary. "I need a place to stay," she said. "For a night. Maybe two. I don't know where else to go." Cal looked at her, taking in the battered look of her clothes, the grime caked on her skin. He didn't have to ask the question she was probably running from. There was a depth to her, the kind of depth that could swallow you whole if you weren't careful. He could send her on her way. Tell her to get lost. Let the desert have her, like the others before her. But for some reason, he didn't. Instead, he nodded toward the fire. "You can stay. For tonight." The girl, Rel, nodded once, her expression unreadable, before she sat down opposite him. She didn't speak again, but that was all right. Cal wasn't much for small talk anyway. They both stared into the fire, each lost in their own thoughts, both running from something they couldn't outrun. And in the silence of that night, as the desert wind whispered around them, Cal knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just any girl. This was someone the world couldn't break. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what he needed. The night passed in an uneasy quiet, the kind of quiet that hung heavy in the air, like the calm before a storm. Cal didn't sleep. He couldn't. His eyes kept flicking to Rel, watching her every movement, studying her. He could tell she was on edge, but he wasn't sure what she was waiting for. It didn't matter, though. It wasn't his business. And as the night stretched on, Cal felt a strange kind of peace settle in around him. The world hadn't changed. He was still alone, and the land was still as wild as it ever was. But the girl, Rel, wasn't alone. She had her own fight. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he knew he was about to find out exactly what that fight was. Cal didn't know what he was getting himself into. Not really. He was a man of few words, but even he could sense the storm brewing inside Rel. She wasn't just a lost girl looking for shelter. No, she carried something much darker in her silence, a history she'd never speak of, but that was written all over her. The first night was easy enough. She kept to herself, watched the fire flicker, and barely touched the food he offered. Cal didn't press. She didn't want company, and he didn't need it. But when the morning light crept over the hills, something in the air had changed. It wasn't just the heat from the desert sun. It was the tension between them. "You sleep?" Cal asked, as he made his way toward the corral to check on the horses. Rel didn't answer at first. Instead, she stood and walked to the edge of the camp, her eyes scanning the horizon. "Never really slept," she muttered finally, her voice rough as if it had been unused for too long. "Just waiting." Cal wasn't sure what she meant by that. But again, it wasn't his business. His eyes followed her, watching as she surveyed the land like she was searching for something. There was something about her that felt different. Not just wild, but dangerous. Like she carried a storm within her, a power that, if unleashed, could tear through everything in its path. And maybe, just maybe, Cal was foolish enough to want to see it. That morning, Rel said little. She had a strange look in her eyes, something distant, haunted. Cal noticed the way she flinched when he walked too close, the way her hands twitched, as if she was ready to fight or run at the slightest provocation. But the girl wasn't running from something out there. No, she was running from something inside her, from the past. She was a prisoner of it, like an animal pacing in a cage. And Cal had a sinking feeling that he was about to learn just how deep the scars went. By midday, the silence between them was thick. They'd saddled up the horses, the sun beating down like a furnace, and Rel was quiet, focused, her eyes scanning the horizon, her every muscle coiled tight. Cal tried to focus on the task at hand, on the ranch, on what needed to be done. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the girl. They were out on a ridge, checking the perimeter, when she finally spoke. "They're coming," she said, her voice low but clear. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. Cal stopped mid-step, feeling his pulse quicken. "Who's coming?" Rel didn't look at him, just kept staring into the distance, her eyes hard, unblinking. "Them," she said, her words heavy with meaning. "The ones who made me." Cal's chest tightened, though he didn't let his confusion show. He wasn't one to ask too many questions, at least, not until it was absolutely necessary. But this was different. He had to know. "Who are you running from, Rel?" he asked, stepping closer to her. Her gaze shifted to him then, and in her eyes he saw something, a flash of raw, untamed fury that made the air around them crackle. "You don't know what you've found, Cal." Her words were barely above a whisper, but the weight behind them hit like a blow. "I'm not just a girl. I'm what happens when men think they can control something they don't understand." Cal frowned, his mind racing. He'd heard whispers. He'd heard the stories about the projects, the experiments out of sight, the kind of things people only whispered about in dark corners. But he hadn't believed them. He thought it was all just talk. Until now. "What kind of experiments?" he asked, his voice rough. Rel didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled her sleeve back to reveal a deep, jagged scar running down her arm. It wasn't a wound from the outside, it was something deeper. Something carved into her skin. "They made me. They thought they could break me," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "They thought they could tame me." Cal felt his stomach twist as the pieces fell into place. She wasn't just a runaway, she was a victim. A living, breathing reminder of what humans were capable of when they tried to play God. He wanted to say something, but words didn't come. All he could do was stand there, staring at her, this wild, broken girl who had been through hell and back. But the moment passed, and with it, any chance to respond. Rel turned away, her eyes cold now, the storm inside her building once more. "They're coming," she repeated, her voice stronger now. "And when they do, they'll burn everything in their path. But it's not just about survival anymore. It's about something else, something much bigger." Cal could feel the weight of her words pressing down on him, but he didn't move. He wasn't sure what was going to happen next, but one thing was clear. Whatever war she was running from, it wasn't over. And soon, he would be caught right in the middle of it. That night, the air was thick with unease. The fire crackled as it burned low, casting shadows across the desert landscape. Cal sat, staring into the flames, lost in his thoughts. But his peace didn't last long. From the distance, he heard the unmistakable sound of hooves. Several of them. Rel was the first to move, her body tense, alert. She didn't need to say a word. Cal knew. They were here. In the distance, a small group of riders appeared on the horizon. They were fast, methodical. There was no mistake now, they had found her. Cal stood, instinctively reaching for his rifle, but Rel was already ahead of him. She moved like a storm, fast and fierce, disappearing into the shadows. Before he could stop her, his heart hammered in his chest. What was she about to do? He followed. And that was the moment he realized he hadn't just taken in a runaway girl. He had taken in a warrior. And now, he was about to see just how far she would go to burn everything down to the ground. The riders moved like wolves in the night silent, swift and deadly. Cal barely had time to draw his rifle before they were upon him. Rel, though, she was already gone, blending into the darkness with a ferocity he hadn't seen before. The wild girl, the one they said couldn't be tamed, was moving like she was born for this. Cal felt the cold touch of reality as he realized this wasn't just about protecting a runaway. This was about survival. Not just his own, but hers. And in the end, maybe even the world's. He pushed through the underbrush, the sound of hooves growing louder with every step. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming, but there was no turning back. Not now. Not with Rel in the mix. The first shot rang out. Cal's heart slammed in his chest as he dove for cover, his rifle tight in his grip. He didn't have time to think, didn't have time to plan. He only had time to react. And the moment he did, everything fell into place. Rel had already taken out 2 of the riders, her aim as deadly as a rattlesnake strike. The 3rd rider was closing in on her, but Cal had a perfect shot. Without hesitation, he squeezed the trigger, the bullet tearing through the air with a crack that echoed in the canyon. The rider jerked in the saddle, his body going limp as his horse veered off course and crashed into the rocks. Cal exhaled. Sharply, it was done. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Rel didn't flinch as she turned to him, her eyes as cold and unfeeling as the desert wind. "That's one more dead," she muttered. "But we're not done yet." The fire in her voice wasn't just anger, it was something darker. Something he hadn't yet begun to understand. "Who are they?" Cal asked, his voice low. "The ones who made me," she said, her jaw tight. "The ones who think they own me." Cal's gaze flickered to the riders' fallen bodies. Number. Matter what they had done to her, Rel wasn't the one who needed saving. She wasn't even the one who needed redemption. It was them, the ones who thought they could break her. And Cal was about to make sure they knew just how wrong they were. As the last of the riders were dealt with, Cal and Rel moved toward the remains of Ashlock Ridge. The land was a graveyard, scorched earth where something twisted had once thrived. And now, it was the place where Rel's past would be buried, along with everything she had fought so hard to escape. But what they didn't expect was the truth waiting for them beneath the ruins. They found it in the old depot hidden underground, the remnants of a world that had been burned long ago. Files, photos, equipment. And something much worse. Cal's name. He was more than just a witness to Rel's past. He had been involved in it. Cal couldn't breathe as he flipped through the files. He wasn't just a bystander. He was a participant. A piece of a larger machine that had never cared who it broke. "Your name's here too," Rel said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's all connected. Everything they did to me. Everything they did to you." Cal's mind raced, but he couldn't make sense of it. The name, his name. It didn't belong there. He had never been part of whatever sick experiments they had done to Rel, to the other children. Had he? "Tell me what this is, Rel," he said, his voice sharp, desperate. "What the hell is going on?" She looked up from the files, her expression unreadable. "I don't know how much of it you remember," she said, the words heavy with meaning. "But this is bigger than you think. It's not just about me anymore. This is about everyone they've touched." Cal stared at her, the weight of her words crashing into him. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for something much bigger. Something that would tear the whole system apart. Ashlock Ridge wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. A battleground. A place where the war they'd been running from would finally be fought. And it was a war neither of them could afford to lose. As they left the wreckage of Ashlock Ridge behind them, the weight of what they had just uncovered began to sink in. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Rel wasn't just a girl who had been forced into a life she didn't want. She was a weapon. A force of nature that could either save them all or tear everything apart. And Cal? He wasn't just some rancher anymore. He was part of this fight. And he wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. But the fight wasn't just about destroying their enemies. It was about taking back everything they had lost. And now, they had the truth. The one thing that could finally set them free. The train was coming. An infernal beast of steel and fire was barreling toward them at breakneck speed. It wasn't just a train. It was a machine of war. A symbol of the system that had turned Rel and Cal into outcasts. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about destruction. Cal stood at the ridge, the smell of sulfur thick in the air as the fuse burned. Down, he didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. He just waited. Rel stood beside him, her stance solid as a mountain. her eyes locked on the train. She wasn't waiting for the explosion. She was waiting for the right moment. And the moment was coming fast. The ground beneath their feet began to shake. And in the distance, the metallic roar of the train grew louder. The sound of inevitability. Boom! The explosion rocked the earth. A deafening roar that split the night like thunder. The ground beneath them buckled and cracked as the first blast sent up a column of smoke and fire that could be seen for miles. The train, once a mighty machine of death, now lay in pieces, scattered across the canyon floor. Rel was already moving, a blur of motion as she bounded down the ridge with a speed that took Cal's breath away. He followed, rifle slung over his shoulder, but he didn't aim to kill. Not yet. They weren't after a body count. They were after something more. They were after freedom. When the smoke cleared, Cal and Rel were standing over the wreckage. Bodies, but not just any bodies, soldiers, uniformed and masked, rising from the wreckage like shadows. These weren't men. Not anymore. They were them. The ones who had tried to break her. The ones who had made her, shaped her, turned her into a weapon. Rel's lips curled into a dark smile as she drew a knife from the sheath at her side. They didn't think we would fight back, she muttered. They were wrong. But Cal wasn't focused on the soldiers. Not yet. He had bigger things on his mind. In the distance, rising from the wreckage of the VN train, was a figure, a silhouette that seemed to absorb the light. Tall, armored, and moving with a speed no human should possess. Cal, Rel's voice was low, urgent. It's one of them. One of the subjects. Cal's hand tightened around his rifle. He'd seen a lot in his life, but this was different. This was something beyond anything he'd ever imagined, and he was about to face it head-on. The creature charged, faster than a rattlesnake strike. It moved like it was born for battle, each step a silent promise of violence. It closed the distance in seconds, its massive hand reaching for Rel's throat, lifting her off the ground like she weighed nothing. Rel didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She fought. Cal fired twice, but the bullets bounced off the creature's armor, sparks flying like broken stars. It didn't even slow down. Damn it, Cal hissed, dropping the rifle. And drawing his sidearm. He was out of options. The creature wasn't just fast, it was built for this. It was designed to destroy. But Rel, she was built for something else entirely. She twisted in the creature's grip, her legs slamming into its chest. She struck again and again, each blow a hurricane, each movement a thunderclap. She wasn't just fighting a man. She was fighting a thing, a creation. She hit it with everything she had, but it didn't go down. It was too powerful, too fast. But then, something changed. Rel's eyes narrowed as she grabbed the creature's helmet, her fingers curling around the edges. It was hard metallic, but she didn't care. She bent it. The helmet cracked under the pressure, splitting like a shattered mirror. Behind it, the face of a boy. The creature's eyes flickered as it looked at her. Fear, confusion, and then nothing. The boy collapsed, unconscious, crumpling to the ground at her feet. Rel didn't look down at him. She didn't feel pity. She only felt a cold certainty. He was never a man, she said, her voice a low growl. Just another experiment. Cal stood there, his heart pounding in his chest as he watched her. This girl, this wild force of nature, was the one thing they couldn't control. And in that moment, he realized something. Something deep and unshakable. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future, for everything they had lost and everything they could still gain. As they moved on, leaving the boy behind, the weight of the battle ahead loomed large. But they weren't running anymore. They weren't hiding. They were ready to burn it all down. The night was still, but the world had already shifted. The winds were different now. The silence didn't feel empty, it felt charged. as if the land itself had felt the tremors of the past and knew the future was coming for it. Cal and Rel moved through the ruins of Ashlock Ridge, the remains of what had once been a thriving mining town, now nothing more than a scar on the landscape. The fire that had consumed the train was still smoldering in the distance, but there was no time to look back. Not now, not when they had finally found what they had been searching for. Buried beneath the crumbled stone in a hidden underground depot, they found it, the evidence. Files, photographs, and a name that sent a cold chill down Cal's spine. VN. It was the name of the company, the organization that had created the soldiers, the children, the experiments. It was the name of the monster they had been fighting, and it was the name of the thing that had taken so much from them both. But it wasn't just the name that hit hardest. It was the documents, the files. And in the middle of it all, Cal found something he didn't expect. His own name, his face. He had been one of them, an experiment, a subject. Cal? Rel's voice cut through the haze in his mind. He blinked, looking up at her. Her face was unreadable, but he knew she was watching him, waiting for something. You all right? He nodded. But the truth? The truth felt heavier than anything he'd ever carried. How long? Rel asked. How long have they been doing this? Cal didn't answer right away. He couldn't. The realization hit him. Harder than anything, the truth was worse than he could have imagined. They weren't just trying to break Rel. They had been trying to break everyone, including him. But this time, they weren't just breaking people. This was about creating an army of obedience, and Cal? He was a part of that army. The anger burned like a brand inside him. They were never going to stop coming. VN wasn't a company. It was a machine. A force that devoured everything in its path. And if he was going to survive this, if they were going to survive this, he had one choice. Burn it down. They didn't hesitate. They didn't pause. They moved quickly, pulling the files from the shelves, sifting through them for every last scrap of information. But as they gathered the documents, something else caught Cal's eye. It was a photograph. The girl, Rel, her face was bruised and battered, a mark burned across her cheek that he recognized all too well. She was a subject, labeled as too wild. But there was something different about this photo. Someone had scrawled a message across the back. A single word, Re. Her name. Cal turned the photo over in his hands. He had no idea what it meant. But there was something he knew in his gut. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. The letter in the file was short, cold, and unmistakable. You want us gone? Erase every child's name from your books. Erase every helmet, every needle, and burn the rest. Or we come back. It's time to finish this, Cal said quietly, his eyes hardening. We burn it all. Rel, standing in the shadows behind him, met his gaze. There was no hesitation in her eyes. She was with him. And together, they were about to show the world just how wild they could be. They set the charges. Cal lit the fuse. And as the earth beneath them began to tremble once more, they didn't run. They didn't hide. They watched as the flames of rebellion consumed the heart of Ashlock Ridge. Cal had never expected to settle down. The open land, the wind sweeping across the ridgelines, the endless horizon, it was his world, and he had long learned to thrive in solitude. But the events at Ashlock Ridge had changed everything. They didn't just destroy the past. They reclaimed it. A year had passed since the inferno at Ashlock Ridge. Emberfield had been born from the chaos, but not as a place of escape, no. This was a place of building. A home forged from the fires of rebellion. A community that rose out of the ashes of a broken world. Cal and Rel had done more than survive. They had created something new. But even in the midst of rebuilding, the world around them was changing. People came from far and wide, some looking for refuge, others for revenge, and still others searching for purpose. Cal and Rel welcomed them all. They taught the survivors how to fight, how to stand, how to reclaim the land they'd lost. Emberfield wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a front line. The children they had saved, the ones who had escaped the horrors of VN, were growing up strong. They were learning the ways of the land, how to work the soil, how to hunt, and most importantly, how to survive. The older ones, who had once been as lost as Rel, now found purpose in rebuilding what had been destroyed. But Rel? She had found something deeper. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just the weapon, the wild girl, the broken thing. She was home. And Cal, for all his rough edges and unspoken scars, was the only one who had ever seen her for what she truly was. Not a project, not an experiment, but a woman born to ride beside him. One night, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting the land in golden fire, a rider appeared at the edge of Emberfield, a stranger. He was young, tall, with dark eyes and a nervous energy about him. He rode into the settlement without hesitation, but there was a wariness in his step, like a man walking through the gates of a place he didn't fully understand. He asked for Cal by name. "I've got something for you," the boy said, holding out a small, weathered package. Cal took it, his gaze flickering over the stranger for a moment, before tearing the paper open. Inside there was a journal thick and worn from years of use, and a photograph. It was of Rel, the one labeled Too Wild. But this time, there was a difference. The word under her name, the one that had once been scratched out this time, it wasn't just a word. It was her name, Ree. Cal didn't say a word. He just stared at the photo in silence, his mind racing. The boy? Gone. Vanished like a shadow at dusk. Rel joined him on the porch, standing beside him as the sky turned dark. She didn't need to ask, she knew. What if they come again? She asked, her voice soft, but carrying the weight of everything they'd been through. "They will," Cal answered, his voice steady. "But we'll be ready." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply watched the sun disappear behind the hills, the land that had been their battleground, now their home. And though the world outside might have been dark, for the first time in years, they had a future. Together. "What do we do?" Rel asked after a long pause. Cal turned to her, his gaze unwavering. "We ride beside each other." And just like that, it wasn't about survival anymore. It wasn't just about revenge or reclaiming what had been lost. It was about something bigger. Freedom. And for the first time, Rel didn't see herself as the weapon. She didn't see herself as the wild girl who had been broken and built to destroy. She saw herself as something else, something new. Something free. The road ahead wasn't clear. Cal and Rel knew that. They knew that even though Emberfield had become a sanctuary, it was only a matter of time before the past came knocking at their door. But they weren't afraid anymore. They were ready. They had already burned the world behind them. Now it was time to build something that could stand in the face of whatever came next. And if the world came for them again, they wouldn't just run. They wouldn't hide. They would stand together. Don't miss what's coming next. Click the next story and hit like, comment, and follow BigBites and Brews for more Wild West stories.